and welcome to Talking Europe. Terrorists striking at the heart of EU institutions in what is effectively the capital of the European Union. Brussels struck on Tuesday. It's the second terrorist attack in a European Union city in the last 4 months. Well, to talk about that more, we've now come to the Belgian embassy here in Paris to meet with Ambassador Mertens de Wilmars. Thank you so much for taking time out in such a week to talk to us. Again, Mr. Mertens de Wilmars, we've seen your two countries struck violently by really locals turning against their own countries and their own compatriots.
Yes, it's a mixture of people from our countries, children of immigration indeed, but who have been raised in our countries which are part of it. And like every community, you have people who settled well and some who settled less well. But still, it's very much of a surprise. Of course, we can reconstruct the circumstances. We probably realize that some things of the past were not ideal, should have been done otherwise, could have been done otherwise, better. But still, I think the main feeling is not understanding what's happening.
Indeed, we saw the French President François Hollande come and visit you in the hours after that attack last Tuesday. A show of solidarity, but as you say there has been an element of finger-pointing as well towards Belgium, saying, you know, we should have seen this coming.
You have a lot of people expressing their opinions. It's not always adequate. I think sometimes people should think twice and remain silent. I can come back on some comments about this.
I'm thinking of the French Finance Minister, Michel Sapin, who said Belgium was naive.
I did not see the comments. I did not hear it. I saw one of the phrases he mentioned, and taken out of the context, this phrase is not so horrible. I think it's quite close to my own analysis. Of course, every decision we took 40 years ago was not perfectly adequate. Maybe it was 40 years ago, but not today. So there are certainly things which we should correct and things which did not run in the optimal way. But maybe the circumstances were not optimal to make this kind of comment at this moment. I think we should take care of the people who are hurt, their families, their feelings, and the feeling of Brussels. And when I say Brussels, I mean all those communities living in Brussels, the European communities living in Brussels are shocked, and they don't need to be blamed, they need to be supported, and they need comfort.
Indeed, as you mentioned, Brussels is such a cosmopolitan city. You know, we've seen these attacks hit Paris and Brussels most recently, but do you think it's really France and Belgium that's being targeted?
My impression is that certainly the metro station is definitely with a European aim. Maalbeek is in the middle of the European quarters. It's full of commission offices. It's the station where all the people going to the European Parliament go out.
Most of the attackers currently in these recent attacks have, if not been based or from Belgium, have had very concrete links to Belgium. How do you explain that?
I'm going to talk globally about the attacks which happened in Paris and Brussels for the last 15 months, I would say. Indeed, they have all links with Belgium. I'm not really surprised because the policies we have been following in France and in Belgium, including concerning immigration, concerning integration of the immigration and the social policies are quite similar. And those communities in the 60s, the early 70s are more or less common.
So we've failed to integrate people. Have our systems ostracized?
We were not optimal, definitely. It's difficult to generalize. Some of those people issued from the immigration are perfectly integrated, and you would see marvelous people functioning exactly. You would not find out from where they come. But clearly there is part of the population which did not succeed in integration. When you saw them on television, they see we feel like foreigners in Belgium, while they are Belgian. So something failed. Definitely, we should not hide that. We need to act on that.
You mentioned immigration. We've seen Poland already reacting after the attacks in Belgium, saying it absolutely will not welcome any more immigrants into the country, making a massive jump there, tying it to the migrant crisis we're currently seeing in Europe. Yet Belgium has kept its borders open.
Yeah. Don't make me comment on this Polish policy. It's totally inadequate. It probably corresponds to some internal situations, but it's the wrong answer to the wrong question in my view. But we kept the doors open. But at the same time, like in France, the main flux of immigration is not coming towards us. Indeed, we had greater numbers of demands of asylum, but we were capable of managing it, and for the moment it's not a problem.
And how do you react to when we heard there from the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan saying that one of the attackers involved in the Belgium attacks had actually been thrown out of Turkey, and that Turkey had flagged it up to the Netherlands and to Brussels, that this was a suspected criminal and linked to terrorists?
Well, we will have to investigate how it happened, and maybe some things went wrong, but I'm not sure. It's always easy to make a judgment of the past under the lights of today. We don't have the capacities, and we will never have the capacities of reading the minds and the intentions of everybody. It's pointing at something with hindsight we did not have at those times.
What do you think needs to be put in place to secure our security in the European Union now? What can be done?
You know, a lot of decisions have been taken. When we introduced Schengen, we indeed took the decisions to reinforce the external border controls. And then after it was introduced, maybe people in charge of applying the rules thought consideration of national sovereignty were more important. Actually, the decisions were not implemented. After 9/11, it was decided that information should be shared. And again, it is not done. I think definitely in problems which are common, which weight on our shoulders in the whole of Europe, we should apply the decisions which we have taken already.
Ambassador Mertens de Wilmars, thanks so much for taking time out to join us. Well, in the second half of this show, we'll be speaking to a former Belgian Prime Minister to find out what he thinks. But for now, let's look at what came out of the meeting of Interior Ministers. They held an emergency meeting on Thursday to look at what could be done in terms of security for the EU and how fast.
A meeting of European Interior Ministers just 48 hours after the Brussels attacks. The 28 member states want to improve cooperation in the fight against terrorism. France's Interior Minister said tackling arms trafficking was a priority.
I remind you of the importance of the firearms issue. France has asked for a revision of current policy. Doing nothing to change the current situation is not an option.
France hopes the EU will come to an agreement by June, which will modify a European firearms directive that dates back to 1991. Another matter discussed was the passenger name record, a planned European database for all air travellers. The PNR project has been in the works since 2011, but there is now increased pressure for the European Parliament to pass it when it votes in April.
Emphasises that we will exchange information even swifter than we already do, that we will now very soon need to implement the passenger name records. We will need to see a swift completion of legislation on combating terrorism.
Ministers also discussed modifications to the Schengen Agreement, intelligence and information sharing, and the creation of a European task force to combat fake passports. There was much talked about at a meeting that was of the highest urgency, but no concrete decisions were made, leaving a lot of loose ends in the relevant areas.
Well, with me now is former Belgian Prime Minister Yves Leterme. Mr. Leterme, thanks for taking time to speak with us. We've just been looking at a report that looked at what came out of that Interior Minister meeting. One of the issues that seems to have come up is that the EU was pretty lax on gun control, on weapons for a long, long time. It looks like Belgium seems to have become this hub of trafficking.
Yeah, well, it's already some years that we have rumors, information even, that in some zones around Brussels, that there is a kind of hidden market of weapons. And I think it's a good conclusion that on the international level and the European level that there should be more cooperation between police services in that field. But I think it's of even more importance that all these legislations, regulations are applied. I think for some police forces we have in Europe now, at this very moment, we have around big cities some no-go zones. And this should be, of course, avoided. There should be no-go zones for police forces. And I think the first priority should be now to really go into these suburbs, into these places and really make a regulation applied.
Yeah, definitely that seems to be one call for action rather than words. But how do you explain the fact that so many weapons illicitly entered the EU? There's something like 80 million according to the EU Commission figures. I mean, we're being told that they travelled from the Balkan route, a big slip-up.
I think we're a bit victims of a kind of ambiguity. We decided decades ago to have a free movement zone. This is the essence, the core of European integration. And this brings a lot of advantages for the people, for the citizens of Europe. But we didn't take it serious enough, I think, on the side of if you have this free movement, you also have common borders and you have to control the borders. And I think there has been a bit of a laxism at the borders around Europe, but also the airports, the harbor, the ports. And I think there we should increase the efforts, have more coordination, but also a better application of common rules into some zones within member states.
Indeed, that does seem to be a large chunk of the problem, is this common rules and the sharing of information. The EU has definitely had failings, but also a lot of people are saying that even within your country, Belgium, there's the problem of information sharing. Brussels has currently 6 different police forces, I'm being told. It used to be worse, it used to be 19. But is it still necessarily 6, and is this really part of the problem?
Well, I remember that one of the conclusions of the so-called Commission Dutroux, the Parliamentary Inquiry Commission on the Dutroux atrocities, that one of the conclusions was just asking for a better flow of information between police forces. We have been working on that. I think all governments, successive governments, have been asking for more integration of these flow of information in terms of the organization, the practical organization of police forces in Brussels, European capital. There has been a lot of pressure. But of course you have something like the autonomy of the local authorities. You have to have a cooperation with the burgomasters, the mayors, with the people in charge of leading the police forces. And I think it's fair to say that there we still have some work to do.
You think maybe there'll be a new impetus to actually move on? It seems like there's a lot of rivalry as well between the French and the Flemish speaking parts of Belgium. We know that caused your government a lot of stress. Is that still the case today?
I don't think we have to mix up all aspects of the political functioning of Belgium. I don't think that the language issues and the institutional discussions have really played an important role in this, the approach of security affairs in Brussels capital. I think it makes no sense to have a kind of blame game. But it is fair to say that, in the short term, we have to see what went wrong in this case. And Belgium already decided to have a parliamentary inquiry commission. But on the other hand, we have to see more with the helicopter view in the coming weeks how we can improve the common European approach of the flow of information and trying to tackle these issues of rivalry between police forces.
Because we have Europol, a European police force. We have this Schengen information system for the 26 out of the 28 EU countries that are part of it. But that's not really working at all.
In terms of the flow of information, obviously things can be improved. On the other hand, let's be fair, you will never have a no-risk society. We have free movement of people, very difficult to defend borders. There's a lot of advantage to this free movement, but I think in terms of protecting the physical integrity, the security of our citizens, we should pay more efforts. We should invest even more.
After the Paris attacks, so you were one of the people who said be careful for civil liberties. You know, there's a balance to be made between security and freedom. Where do you stand on that now, and why are we still talking about doing these things? You know, what stops things actually getting going?
what I said before, I think that citizens, they really even send out signals now that they are prepared to sacrifice part of their liberty, the free movement. I think people really understand at airports, in stations, railway stations, subway stations, that there has to be an improved control, more control, checking who comes in, what kind of stuff they bring with them, what kind of danger they can represent. I think people are prepared to have a new balance between the liberties, civil liberties on the one hand, and security, the need for security on the other hand. And so I think politicians, for instance, in the PNR directive, members of the European Parliament should be aware of that there is a kind of
Will that really
shift
help,
in the
though, this
public
PNR?
opinion.
Recording what I eat on a plane or where I sit, how's that going to help?
Well, it's more than just about this kind of aspects. And in the case of what happened in Zaventem, of course, it wouldn't have prevented what has happened there. But it's obvious, it's clear that a better exchange of that kind of information gives a new tool to police forces. It was already discussed when I held the presidency of the European Union, it was already on the table. We are now 5-6 years later. I think it's time now to decide. And like Manuel Valls, who's a socialist, said this week, I think that some parties in the European Parliament should take their responsibilities.
Well, even after the Paris attacks, Belgium was looking at that and actually rolling a lot of money into de-radicalisation, notably in certain neighbourhoods. But I'm trying to imagine, what does that actually involve? Is it in the prisons? Because here in France, that's where a lot of people appear to be radicalised. In Belgium, is it the similar story?
I think in the case of Belgium, we already invested a little bit more in monitoring what's happening in the mosques, seeing who is radicalizing people, the movement of people traveling to Syria, coming back. I think a better monitoring of what's happening there is certainly one of the tools we should better use. It's a very tiny minority of people, but they are prepared to sacrifice their own lives. And this is, of course, a very difficult kind of behavior to combat.
Mr. Leterme, thanks so much for giving us your view and being with us here on France 24.
Thank you.
Thanks also to you at home for having watched. That brings us to the end of this part of Talking Europe.